Well, First Corinthians, which we will be starting August 13th. I know some of you are already very excited about this class, but I just kind of wanted to remind you about some of the topics that we're going to be hitting, because Paul does in his letter to Corinth, what we call the first letter to Corinth, but it's actually not his first letter to Corinth. It's the first letter that we have. And it is, man, the topics that he hits. We're talking the gifts of the Holy Spirit. He addresses how we should treat each other in the church. He addresses some issues related to giving guidance to the church in Corinth about marriage and family. He gives some guidance related to women that we're going to discuss in great detail. I know it's very controversial and there's all sorts of sides to that, but we're going to take a deep look at it. And most mind-blowingly, how Paul addresses the question, well, how many of you have ever wondered, what's heaven going to be like? I mean, yeah, okay, then me too. And the angle that Paul takes on that issue is, let's just say that we're like stepping into a different world and we're like, what is he talking about here? What could this possibly mean? But he spends an entire chapter on what happens when we die, after we die, and the age to come. And to us today, because of how we've simplified things, it's like, what in the world is going on with this? What is he getting at? And we're gonna parse that out, and I strongly believe, and that's gonna be towards the end of class, but I strongly believe when we get there, you'll have a more colorful and beautiful picture of eternal life than you ever did before. So there's so many exciting things with 1 Corinthians. You will get that email tomorrow, and I just urge you to go ahead and register for it. Tell your friends. So, are you ready for chapter 49? I know, the reading is like, this is a lot, and it is a lot. So, we're going to try to hit some highlights and approach it in some of the ways that you might not otherwise hear if you go online into some of the traditional studies. But I think that before we get into this blessing / prophecy by Jacob, just a reminder that we've just left chapter 48. And in chapter 48, kind of this underlying theme of chapter 48 is the last shall be first. There's this mindset of the unexpected last one being first, or the least being the greatest. And now, previously in chapter 48, we had Jacob give the blessing to the non-chosen line. And the non-chosen line of Joseph, which is Ephraim and Manasseh, they got an initial special blessing, which is confusing if you're thinking in terms of chosenness as being the only one worthy of blessing, or at least should have the primary blessing. But things are turned upside down here, where the non-chosen, clearly non-chosen, get the first blessing. And we're going to see that theme hidden in the structure of chapter 49 continue here. To help understand what some of these blessings and prophecies are going to relate to in the future, I'm going to try to give a 5-minute or something around 5-minute complete outline of Israelite history from the time of Jacob to the time of Jesus. You ready for this? So yeah, we're talking about 1700 years. So after Jacob's death, shortly, what's going to happen to the tribes of Israel is they will be fruitful and multiply in the land of Egypt, specifically in the land of Goshen. It's kind of like a Garden of Eden place for them to be fruitful and for them to multiply. But what happened in the garden back in chapter 3 and page 3 of Genesis? Well, a snake appears, right? And then things go south. Well, what's going to happen in Israel is a snake is going to appear in the form of a Pharaoh, the guy with the snake coming out of his hat. And because of his oppression, things go south in Egypt as well. So Yahweh raises up a deliverer from a very interesting tribe, actually. He raises up a deliverer to lead them out of the land of their oppression, which is Egypt. And so they are led out of Egypt. They go through this new birth experience as they go through the waters. Remember the Red Sea crossing, which is kind of a patterned after the day 3 of creation, when the dry land appears out of the chaos waters. So dry land appears for them to walk through across these dangerous waters. And they do so. So it's new creation. It's like new birth. And what happens is they, we'll just say they rebel once they enter into this journey to the promised land. And so they're exiled into a 40-year wait to get back into the promised land, or to get to the promised land. So for a generation, 40 years. And then once that 40 years is up, Yahweh raises up another deliverer, this time Joshua, to lead Israel out of the wilderness and into the promised land. And Israel does. They settle in the promised land. They fight the inhabitants, they win battles, and they settle, but there's an asterisk because the settling is not really complete. And then during the period of Judges, Israel enters this cyclical mode of, rebellion against Yahweh, and then they get enslaved by one of the surrounding peoples, and then Yahweh raises up a deliverer, and then after they're delivered, they go through a period of rest, and then they do the whole thing all over again. It's rest, wash, repeat, rebel, cry out, Yahweh raises up, delivers. Same thing happens over and over again in the book of Judges. So ultimately, when they have this judge named Samuel, they're like, dude, you're old. This whole Judges thing, it's very primitive. The sophisticated nations around us, they have actual kings, and that's what we want. And so they do. They end up with a king that looks good in their eyes. It's chosen fruit, and his name is King Saul. And Saul is a total mess. He's a mess. So what happens is there's an anointed king, one that slayed a Nephilim. Anyway, there's an anointed king who's the least in his house. He's the 8th kid. He's like who even thinks about this one? And he's raised up to be king in Saul's stead, and he's from the tribe of Judah. And he establishes the kingdom of Israel in a way that is supposed to last forever until the snake crusher comes. And so he establishes this dynasty. He has a son named Solomon. He's so wise, with an asterisk. There's some issues. And then Solomon has a son, Rehoboam, and Rehoboam is, the kingdom splits in two. And so you have Judah and Benjamin and a little bit of Simeon that form one kingdom, which is David's heirs have that kingdom, and the capital is Jerusalem. But all the other tribes to the north, they split off and form the kingdom. They call themselves Israel. The southern kingdom calls itself Judah. Northern kingdom calls itself Israel, with its capital at Samaria. And every king in Samaria is just really bad. Well, anywhere from bad to really, really bad. And they never come together after that. The two kingdoms remain separate until the big bad Assyrian Empire, one of the world's first superpowers, comes and gobbles up the northern kingdom in the year 722 BC. So this is negative number, going backwards from the year 1, 722. They did not gobble up the southern kingdom of Judah with the capital at Jerusalem. It remained for a while until the new Babylonian Empire, which had defeated the Assyrians, comes and in 3 stages essentially gobbles up the southern kingdom and takes the people from the southern kingdom of Judah captive to Babylon for a number of years. So here are the Israelites living in Babylon. And this is where they begin to be called Jews, because they're from the tribe of Judah, you see. So somewhere around 500 BC, they first begin to be called Jews. And it's while they're there that there's a renaissance of faith. Before that, faith was definitely not completely committed to Yahweh, except in rare cases. But now there is just a revival of faith, and Babylon is conquered by another so far the greatest empire of the ancient world, the Persian Empire. And the king says, you guys can go back if you want to. You can go back to your land. And some do. Some do. They go back and they build a new temple. Solomon's temple was destroyed by the Babylonians. They build a new temple, which is a kind of a shadow of its former self. And there they wait for the coming of the Messiah. In the meantime, after the Old Testament ends and before the New Testament begins, the Persians are also defeated. The great, massive, incredibly sophisticated Persian Empire is wiped out and conquered by essentially one dude by the name of Alexander, who is Macedonian, Greek, culturally Greek, Macedonian by country. And he just, in a span of a very short time, he's still in his 30s, he conquers what you could consider the known world at that time, and starts looking at Arabia, is looking west. He's like, what else can I conquer? He dies young. And his massive empire is divided up by his fighting companions, generals and his other companions. They duke it out. And the biggest portion of the empire goes to this Greek general. He wasn't really a general, but anyway, he rose up. His name is Seleucus, and he forms the Seleucid Empire. And they take over the territory now known as Israel. The Promised Land is now ruled by the Seleucid Greeks, and it is not a very good mix at all. It's a terrible, terrible mix. The Jews revolt. Briefly, they have their own kingdom that is independent, and they get some help. They get some help from this upstart, kingdom in the West called Rome. And the Romans are really good at, when they come to help, they stick around. And they're like, we're here for you, we're here for you. And after a while, it's like, we're running everything now. And this is what the Romans did to those in the Promised Land. So the Romans kind of put a puppet king in charge by the name of Herod the Great. Herod was he was only partly Jewish. He wasn't considered Jewish. Herod was just this total narcissist, but he loved to build things. So he's like, that temple that you guys rebuilt that is kind of run down and it wasn't really good to start with, I'm gonna remodel it. It was a build from scratch, but he said it was a remodel, not to ruffle feathers. And the massive temple that exists in Jesus' day is that temple. It's called the Second Temple still, but really it's like Temple 3.0 at least. And then this is, in this environment, ruled by Rome with this puppet king, Herod the Great, and his family, that Jesus is born. And Jesus is born in Bethlehem, which is the city of David, of the tribe of Judah. He's the promised snake crusher, but he grows up in Sticktown, Nazareth, a place that, what good can come from there. And he goes around announcing that the kingdom of God has drawn near. And he presents the kingdom of God in a way that a lot of people were not expecting. The arrival of the promised snake crusher from Genesis chapter 3 is Jesus. So that's the big meta narrative. And it's in the context of that we get these blessings of Jacob to his sons. And I hope you'll catch some of the points of interest as we go through these, where it's like, I see where that falls in this great story. So what we're going to find in this blessing is there's some references to stuff that's already happened in the book of Genesis that we studied. And you'll be like, oh yeah, I remember that. That was a little traumatic to read about. That was weird, that was strange. But there's also lots of foreshadowing into the future. The blessings are called blessings because of this formal literary style. It's a blessing style. But as you'll see, some of these blessings don't feel like blessings. If you've already read them, you're like, I don't want to be blessed like that. And in fact, the word curse is specifically used in at least one instance here. But let's start. Genesis 49, verse 1. Then Jacob summoned or gathered his sons and said, assemble yourselves, so that, what's the purpose of the assembly? To tell you what will happen in the last days, literally in Hebrew, which is a way of saying in the future. He's not saying, I'm going to now explain the book of Revelation to you, but latter days is literally in Hebrew is a way of saying, this is coming. This is what's coming for you. So straight up, he's saying this is prophetic, what I'm about to tell you. Verse 2, gather together and listen, sons of Jacob. Yes, listen to Israel, your father. So this is a poetic line, and in Hebrew, these poetic lines, there's like 2 lines, sometimes 3 lines that relate to each other. And you're like, isn't he sort of saying the same thing, but in slightly different ways? Yep, that's how Hebrew poetry works. So, listen, sons of Jacob. Yep, listen to Israel, your father. And what you're supposed to do when you're meditating on this is compare the 2 lines and say, okay, in what way are they very similar? And in what ways do they differ? And what are the differences and similarities? Tell me about these 2 lines. And one of the things we see is that he refers to himself in both lines, but with different names. One is Jacob, heel grabber, right? It's a common term for a deceiver. And the second line is struggles with God, what the angel who wrestled with him named him. So deceiver, but God struggler. And sons of Jacob is literally, yes, these are his kids, but also, in a couple of cases, grandkids, but also son of something in Hebrew idiom means you belong to that tradition. So, I don't know, who here works in finance or accounting? So you would be a son or daughter of finance in the Hebrew idiom. Especially if you belong to like a family that was involved in finance. If you're a teacher, you'd be, oh yes, this is so-and-so, daughter of education or son of education. So saying sons of Jacob doesn't only mean literally my kids. It also means you have a tradition that's related to this name, which is deceiver. But you also have a father who is named by God, struggles with God. This is the first prophetic moment that Israel, through this whole history leading up to the snake crusher, is going to be struggling with God. And this prophecy comes true as you read in the rest of the Old Testament. Okay, so this is a prologue, and we're going to look at the structure a little bit later. Verse 3. Okay, Reuben, you're up first. Reuben, you're my firstborn, my might, beginning of my strength, preeminent in dignity and preeminent in power. Now, why is that? Because he's the firstborn. That's how it goes. Firstborn is preeminent. Verse 4. Uncontrollable as water. It's the first mention of water in the Bible. It's like, verse 2, right? So water is the Bible's imagistic symbol for chaos, nothingness. And that's why in Genesis chapter 1, the chaos and nothingness of had to be brought into order, which is what the 7-day creation is all about. So he's calling him a chaos creature here. You shall not have preeminence. And why is that? Because you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it. He went up to my couch. And what he's referring to here is the incident that we've already read about, where Reuben has sex with one of his wives, with Bilhah, the concubine. And so this, just to clarify, what Reuben's biggest sin is not that he was lustful towards somebody he shouldn't have been lustful with. His biggest sin, it was obviously a big sin, his biggest sin was not the act of sexual intercourse with Bilhah. The biggest sin was why. And every ancient reader would know why. Well, the only reason you would do that is to pull a power play, saying it's time for me to be in charge. And this is not the only time that this happens in Scripture. It's not the only time. It happens at other times as well. In fact, it's already happened in Genesis once before, possibly, if you interpret what happened with Ham and Noah in a certain way. So this is a power play. And he's like, nah, I can't wait. I want to be in charge now. And because of that, he is not. He is not. And it's true that the tribe of Reuben never plays a major role in the narrative arc of redemption in the Bible. He moves on to the next two. Simeon and Levi. Yeah, your brothers. Their swords are implements of violence. May my soul not enter into their counsel. May my kavod, my glory, not be united with their assembly. For in their anger, they killed men. And in their self-will, they lamed oxen. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them among Israel. So this is referring to that incident, I think it was in chapter 34. Yep. In 34, when Shechem, who is the prince of the land of Shechem, raped their sister. So how did they respond? I mean, it was an injustice done to their sister, a legit, horrible injustice. And they responded by tricking all of the Shechemites, all the people there, and then slaughtering all the dudes and enslaving the rest of them and taking all their goods for themselves. So you do this one bad thing, and we're going to make everybody you know and everyone who's related to you, and we make all of them suffer. And this is when we hear prophetically that this is, not only is it bad, but cursed. Now, he doesn't curse them, if you'll notice. He does not curse Simeon and Levi. He curses their anger. Their anger. This is a major problem. And as a result, in the apportionment of the tribes, and they finally achieve the promised land, Simeon gets areas, but is kind of absorbed within Judah. Levi is a special case. Levi never doesn't get a big apportionment of land at all, but is dispersed in a redemptive way, because the tribe of Levi. So, is there a member of the tribe of Levi you can think of that's going to show up in a few hundred years here who is important to Israel? It's Moses. Moses is actually from the tribe of Levi. So don't interpret these, anti-blessings as so nobody from that tribe can ever do anything in God's will. Moses of the tribe of Levi, whose anger was cursed. Interestingly, Moses has an anger problem, interestingly. But is he used by God? Oh, yeah, for sure, for sure. All right, verse 8. As for you, Judah, your brothers shall Judah you. Where Judah means praise. As for you, Judah, your brothers shall Judah you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons shall bow down to you. Okay, so his hand on the neck of his enemies, essentially you're going to be victorious, but also all these other siblings, they'll bow down to you. It's a big deal. Judah is a lion's cub. Okay, that word, the word cub there, it's a pun. It's the word gur in Hebrew. Do you remember from some of our past classes that word gur showing up? It means alien, immigrant, wanderer, sojourner, related to gar. So, and this is same spelling, same pronunciation as that. It's actually two different words. Gur as a sojourner, spelled exactly the same way, is a word that, relates to immigrants and sojourners, which is what Israel is right now in Egypt. So Israel is repeatedly invited to see itself as a nation that is aliens in a land that has been granted this promised land now. But remember, you guys were aliens for a long, long time. So we've got some rules here on how you're supposed to treat others who are in the same position. But gur also is a word that can mean lion's cub. Lion's cub, specifically lion's cub. And so I don't think it's accidental that the Moses team is using this word right now as Jacob is speaking this blessing on Judah. I think they're supposed to do some deep reflection on this. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. So this Judah was once prey. But no, you've risen from being beyond prey. What does it mean that he used to be prey? Remember Cain. When Cain was warned, when he was showing, his face was dropped and he was all angry about his brother's sacrifice, Abel getting preferred over his. And Yahweh tells him, why is your face fallen? You can still do well, but sin is a croucher, wants to devour you, wants to have you. So this prey language, I think, is related to that first instance of a sibling who is overcome with envy towards his brother, which is what Cain was feeling. And sin took that opportunity to devour Cain. So was Judah in a similar position? Well, sure he was. Sure he was. He was envious of his brother Joseph. He took part in Joseph being trafficked as a slave into Egypt. But how did he rise up? He rose up because at the end of the story, he's offering his life to protect another favored brother, Benjamin, a younger brother. So he just came around. And this is what this is referring to, I think. So now you're a lion. How is he a lion? He's willing to give his life for somebody else. And as a lion, who dares stir him up? The scepter, this is a ruling symbol, will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet until Shiloh comes. Okay, New Testament perspective now. New Testament perspective is Judah was ultimately destined through his line to have the ruler's scepter, which was fulfilled in King David. He was of the line of Judah. And from King David, the scepter did not depart from any time there was a king in Jerusalem. It was always some kind of son of David until the coming of the snake crusher. Shiloh literally means tranquility. It's peace. It's also the name of a city in which the tabernacle, the house of the covenant, the ark of the covenant was first situated permanently. It was a mobile thing, in the days of Moses and so forth, but when the promised land was conquered, Shiloh is where the place of meeting between Yahweh and humans was placed. So it's very significant as a symbol. From a New Testament perspective, looking back, is who is the meeting place of peace between heaven and earth? Well, it's Jesus. It's Jesus. But the scepter will not depart from Judah's line until this person comes. And to him shall be the obedience of the peoples, meaning all the tribes at least. He ties his foal to the vine, his donkey's colt to the choice vine, washes his garments in the blood of grapes. His eyes are dull from wine and his teeth white from milk. Okay, lots of abundance in his land, so much so that the destructive proclivities of the donkey, this is Jewish scholar named Sarna, is interpreting it this way, that donkeys can be very destructive, but it won't matter. They can be tied to grapevines. They're just not going to tear it up because there's just going to be so much abundance in your land. Wine-stained clothing, very common in the winemaking industry, but it's also a metaphor of blood and death, that there's something relating to your line that's going to be abundance and wine, but also something that relates to blood and death, which we also see fulfilled in the snake crusher of his line, Jesus. It says, your eyes are darker than wine and teeth whiter than milk. Does that seem strange? This is an ancient way of describing beauty. That the contrast between the color of the eyes and the color of your teeth will be very great. And it's good looking in terms of abundance and beauty. Moving on. Zebulun will reside at the seashore, harbor for ships, and his flank shall be towards Sidon. That was one of the major Phoenician cities. So Zebulun, interestingly, this is out of order because Issachar is the older brother of the two. So now we've moved out of order. Zebulun comes first. It's not accidental. Zebulun, in terms of the future tribe being apportioned, it's not right by the sea, but it borders the Sea of Galilee. And it's believed by scholars that the Phoenicians used the people of Zebulun as labor in the sea, so it did come to pass. Issachar is a strong donkey, lying down between the sheepfolds. And when he saw that a resting place was good and the land was pleasant, he bowed his shoulder to carry burdens and became a slave at forced labor. So the idea here is Issachar kind of pulls a lot where it's like, you know what, this looks good. I'm just going to rest here in this lush and beautiful land because it looks good in my eyes, which, that's tricky, but becomes enslaved. And it is believed by scholars that after the period of Judges in which Deborah reconquested, took over some land back for the Israelites, that the people of Issachar were content to continue as forced laborers by the surrounding people. Verse 16, Dan. Now Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel, and Dan shall be a serpent in the way, a horned viper in the path that bites the horse's heels so that its rider falls backwards. For your Yeshua I wait, Lord. For your salvation I wait. Isn't this a wonderful blessing? So Dan becomes a stumbling block for other people who does rule, but rules in such a way as to hurt other people. right, so I kind of gave it away. But you know Samson in the book of Judges? Remember him, Samson? Guess what tribe he's from? Yeah, he's from the tribe of Dan. So be careful about, when you tell the story of Samson to the kids and grandkids, about presenting him as like a straight up hero. That is not what the Judges portrait, if you read carefully, is doing there. He's a mixture of really hopeful, amazing, anointed things, and also some really, really dire warnings about how not to judge the people and bless the nations around you. It's a very, very thought-provoking mix. But Samson is a perfect example of somebody who is a stumbling block for others, especially nations, and seeing Israel as a city on the hill. So Yeshua, or salvation, will not come through snake rule. That's not how it's going to come. The strength of overcoming enemies by human enemies by force is not how the snake crusher is going to roll. Verse 19. Oh, as for Gad, a band of raiders shall attack him, but he'll attack at their heels. Gad in Hebrew means troop. So the troop will be trooped. They're part of that northern kingdom that broke away from David's line in the distant future. And Gad will be following this tradition of heel grabbing. That tribe will be right along for the ride. Verse 20, as for Asher, his food shall be rich, and he will yield royal delicacies. The rich territory that was assigned to Asher in the future would be used to provide delicacies for Canaanite kings that the Israelites never get around to conquering. Verse 21, Naphtali is a doe let loose. He utters beautiful words. Naphtali is also going to pay tribute to Canaanite overlords. But somehow or other, this verse says that its position, which by the way is in northern Galilee, will serve as a future source of good news. Interesting, huh? I wonder what good news that would be. Now, Nazareth itself was located technically in the territory of Zebulun, but Naphtali is right up there in northern Galilee as well. Now we get to Joseph. And by Joseph, I mean Ephraim and Manasseh, his two sons. Verse 22. Joseph is a fruitful branch by a spring. Its branches hang over a wall. The archers provoked him and shot at him and were hostile toward him, but his bow remained firm. His arms were agile. From the hands of the mighty one of Jacob, from there's the shepherd, the stone of Israel. From the God of your father who helps you, and by the Almighty who blesses you. I'm just going to interpose here with a quote from Kathleen O'Connor's commentary on this section of Genesis, because I think that her elucidation of the divine titles and what's going on here is helpful. She says, the divine titles receive no explanation here. The mighty one of Jacob will give strength and power and will connect Joseph firmly to the God of his father. The shepherd, drawn from the work of the family, will protect and guide him. God, the rock, will provide solidarity and reliability. The God of your father will help you, and the Almighty, El Shaddai in Hebrew, sometimes called the God of the mountains, is the one who has the power to bless with cosmic implications from heaven above, earth below, and the deep as well. So mountains were seen as an image of the connection point of heaven and earth. And so this is what this image is drawing on. So this is a mighty blessing. It's a mighty blessing. Continuing, with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lie beneath, blessings of the breasts and of the womb, the blessings of your father have surpassed the blessings of my ancestors. Up to the furthest boundary of the everlasting hills, may they be on the head of Joseph and on the top of the head of the one distinguished among his brothers. So the blessing for Joseph is not only a blessing for Ephraim and Manasseh, but this is kind of a combined blessing for all of the northern tribes that eventually will break off from David's line. Because the prophets in the future, they've latched on to this, actually, from Genesis 49, to call all that northern kingdom Ephraim sometimes. They're a fruitful vine, ben parat in Hebrew, double meaning. There's a fructifying spring, and also there's a para by the stream, or a donkey by the stream. So there's abundance, there's stubbornness. And there's an echo of that promise made to Ishmael back in our Abraham study, if you recall, that he would be a wild donkey of a man who was rescued by Yahweh by a stream, who was an archer. So all these images link Joseph's line to Ishmael's line. He's not the chosen son, but nevertheless, God's not going to forget him, and his line will be blessed. The northern kingdom of Israel, as we briefly talked about, what happened to them? The Assyrians came, conquered them, didn't just take them into captivity, but they were assimilated into the peoples of the Middle East. So they became indistinguishable from Gentiles. Their line, their blood, and so forth was just mixed, their heritage mixed in with all the Gentile nations. So one possible reflection on this is that the blessings that were promised to Joseph can be seen as flowing through Joseph and to all the families of the earth. The one who is distinguished among his brothers, Joseph, can be an avenue of blessing, even though the Messiah himself comes through Judah. So how does Joseph get reunited with his brothers? By both Jew and Gentile coming into the same stream of promise through the Messiah. Isn't that cool? Okay. Oh, yeah, there's another brother. Benjamin. Favorite son here. Youngest. You know, Benjamin's a ravenous wolf. In the morning, he devours the prey. In the evening, he divides the spoils. All right, Benjamin himself, there's no indication that Benjamin himself was this way, other than this verse. But I think it's a clear indication that this is a prophetic indication of what kind of future the Benjaminites will live out, the choices that they will make. If you read towards the end of the book of Judges, it's pretty horrible. It's horrible. In some ways worse than Sodom. And there's another famous Benjaminite. Famous, warlike, violent, ravenous Benjaminite. His name is King Saul. King Saul was of the tribe of Benjamin. And did he act out this sort of ravenous, wolf-like? Well, yeah. Very jealous for his position and very envious of anyone else taking any kind of credit. This is just straight up kingdom of hell stuff. It's how the kingdoms of this world work. It's like, well, if somebody else gets credit, then this somehow makes me look bad, and I can't have that, so we've got to do away with that person. And so Saul the Benjamite was an embodiment of this in many ways. There was another Saul the Benjamite, though. There's a Saul the Benjamite that lived in and after the time of Jesus, who actually grew up in a Gentile land to a Jewish family. and was so brilliant with Torah scholarship that he was sent to be a student in Jerusalem itself under the tutelage of one of the most famous rabbis in all of Jewish history. Still today they consider him, a rabbi named Gamaliel. Learned at the feet of Gamaliel and had the capacity to memorize and learn just huge, perhaps all of the Hebrew Bible and other sacred writings. Was also brilliant in Greek culture and writings. And when this word came that someone people were calling the Messiah was executed by the Romans in a shameful way, that he somehow rose from the dead, and lots of people are following, Saul the Benjamite was determined to stamp this thing out. And he assisted with and brought comfort to those who killed the very first person to give their life for Jesus, a guy named Stephanos. And then he took it upon himself to go further than that, to arrest, persecute, have thrown in the dungeon, throw away the key, as many of these followers of the way that he possibly could. And to escape his wrath, there were believers in Jesus that fled out of Roman jurisdiction into a different jurisdiction. And that didn't stop him. He got all the necessary permissions to pursue them there. And he was on his way to this other jurisdiction in Damascus in Acts chapter 9, when there was a bright light, a thunderbolt of sound. And he looks up and he sees someone saying, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? Who are you, Kyrios? Who are you, Lord?" "I'm Jesus. I'm the one you're persecuting." You know, it's kind of hard to kick against the goads, isn't it? Saul, the Benjamite. And this man had his apocalypse on that road. It's the fellow we know as Paul the Apostle. I want to encourage you that these blessings and predictions are never a statement that a member of these tribes cannot be redeemed. Saul the Benjamite is a perfect example. He was a ravenous wolf, became a spring of life. Among other things, he wrote 1 Corinthians. So, all these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father said to them when he blessed them. He blessed them, everyone with the blessing appropriate to him. That's 3 times the word blessing is used there, indicating, of course, it's a new creation, third day, but it's also a time of testing is ahead. Verse 29, he commanded them and said to them, "I'm about to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite." You know, cave that's in the field of Machpelah, which is opposite Mamre in the land of Canaan. That's a lot of Gentiles just got named there. Just want you to know. Which Abraham bought along with the field from Ephron the Hittite as a burial site. There they buried Abraham and his wife Sarah. They buried Isaac and his wife Rebekah. There I buried Leah. The field and the cave that is in it, purchased from the sons of Heth. And when Jacob finished commanding his sons, he drew his feet into the bed where he gathered to his people. So, interesting, isn't it? The purchase of the cave and the field becomes central to the legal claim that Israel has to the promised land, because it was a symbol of equitable dealing with the Gentiles. So I just want to point out this chiasm that all of chapter 49 is, because it's very instructive. Chapter 49 is one big chiasm. You can see, A, that the gathering is the is the word that is related to the gathering the sons. He's gathered to his people, A prime. The second line, there's a prologue to the oracle, which there's an epilogue then in verse 28. Leah's sons are blessed, which matches, that's his first wife, which matches with Rachel's sons being blessed in verses 22 through 27. And then we go to the concubines. Bilhah's first son is blessed, which is Dan, which matches onto Bilhah's second son being blessed, Naphtali. But the center of the chiasm is so strange. It's the sons of the concubine of the least favored wife. In all human measurements, these are the least important tribes. And they're at the center of the chiasm. The central point of this whole chapter, if you look at the literary structure, is these least important sons. This is for sure an indication by the Moses team to the careful reader is that there are no unimportant children. That if you consider yourself the forgotten, the least important, the least favored, or the least favored, guess who God is thinking about? Thinking about you. You get elevated to central importance. This is an inversion of typical human thinking. The unfavored receive blessing. So I just gave you a map there so that you can see visually. This is a map about something else, actually. It's a map about city-state empires, the Amorite, I don't know if I would use the word empires, but the 6 Amorite areas that are talked about in the Old Testament. But it was also a very good map of where, more or less, these tribes land in the geography of the Promised Land, or what is now Israel and Egypt and Jordan and Lebanon. So you can see there, more or less, the boundaries of where these tribes landed. And you'll notice that Judah and Benjamin and Simeon mixed in are kind of that big purple blob. And that's the southern kingdom that becomes the kingdom of Judah. Everything from the top part of Dan, Ephraim, Gad, Reuben, Manasseh, Asher, Naphtali, all of that, it becomes eventually the future kingdom of Israel, which is not related to the kingdom of Judah. So we don't have much time. We have less than a minute. So if anyone has a reflection that will last less than 30 seconds, as we have to empty out here for the women's ministry.
Okay, so since the chiasm lays on the least favored, so is that where the last becomes first and the first becomes last?
Yeah, so I think too often scholars or Bible commentators or preachers or all of us make the mistake of saying that Jesus introduced this novel concept, that the last shall become first, that the least shall be the greatest, and that this was, completely unknown to any Jew of that day. And that is not true. This was already a concept which was debated. It was a minority view, for sure, but it was something that was deeply embedded in the Hebrew Bible. And Jesus is not innovating, he's pointing it out. This is how the kingdom of God was meant to operate from the very, very beginning. So, yeah, isn't that an interesting way of looking at it? Man, I'll see y'all next week for the finale.